yoga, union, okay? Higher self, lower self. God, individual. Atman, Paramatma. It means to join or to yoke or to bind. That's what yoga is. So I'm doing this talk just to clarify some confusion that people often have about, like, what's yoga, and is it about fitness, or is it about spirituality, and is it like Pilates, and like there's just so much. Like, I even remember my dad once, he would see me when I'd go to visit them, and of course we'd have to move the dining room table, and I'd have my mat, and I'd be, you know, kicking up the wall and doing things, and he's like, well, we're supposed to be something spiritual, you know. So, so I'm going to try to like thread all this together, because in today's world we often hear yoga being spoken of in the same breath as Pilates. And whereas there's nothing wrong with that, there's nothing wrong with Pilates. Joseph Pilates was influenced. He got a lot of his ideas from the yoga asanas. So I'm going to attempt to unpack all this and make it understandable. So the short answer would be that yoga isn't necessarily about fitness. However, you need to be fit to do yoga. So at the beginning stages, it looks a lot like fitness. And it is, because especially Westerners, there's some imbalance in their body, and so they have to do a lot of work just to get to the foundational level. So when people say yoga these days, they're often meaning asana, okay? It's the third, these are the 8 limbs of yoga. Ashtanga yoga means 8-limbed yoga. And at this juncture, I'm just going to add that there are many types of yoga, because as I said, it just means to bind, okay? It's a means of self-realization, of realizing who you are on the deeper levels of being, underneath all these bodies, all these sheaths, as the yogis call it. So I mentioned in my last video how in asana we're purifying this food sheath, this physical body. So in a nutshell, the short answer is that's really the difference between yoga and fitness. Is yoga is actually going after all of the sheaths, which there are 5 in yoga philosophy, whereas fitness is just going after this food sheath, the one that you see, the one that science tells us that that's the only one there is. So there's several types of ways of seeking this union, okay, with the divine. If you don't like the word God, then we'll just use the word divine. Because see, yoga by definition is presupposing, is on the premise. Yoga is based on the premise that there is something above and beyond this physical existence. And there is something deeper than this, the reality that we see with our eyes and that we apprehend with our senses. So yoga is based on that, by definition. It's not a religion. You can be any religion and practice yoga. But if you do practice yoga, it's kind of like, by definition, it's implied that you do feel that there's something beyond what we can perceive with our senses. Okay, so that's another difference between yoga and something like Pilates. Pilates is going to give you this beautiful, right? Beautiful, sleek core. Nothing wrong with that. So there's other paths to union. There's karma yoga, people that do action, that do work, and they devote this work to their spiritual practice, to their quest for self-realization. There's bhakti yoga, where people sing and they do a lot of prayers, chants, mantras. There's mantra yoga. There's jnana yoga, the yoga of study and the intellect. So there's all these different types of yoga. So yoga is it's a very broad word. So what we think of in the West when we are doing yoga is essentially we're referring to the work of a sage known as Patanjali, who lived somewhere between 500 and 200 BC. And he created these sutras. Okay, so that's what a lot of this contemporary yoga we see in modern day is based on the work of Patanjali. And he codified the Yoga Sutras. Sutra means it's an aphorism, and they're very brief. And for any serious yoga student, I highly recommend that you study and look at the Yoga Sutras. So the Yoga Sutras talk about Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga just means 8 limbs. Okay, it's also called Raj Yoga, which means the royal road to self-realization. Raja means royal. So in these 8 limbs, we have Yama and Niyama, and these are like moral and ethical observances. Okay, this is something that's done on the inside. Okay, then we have asana and pranayama. So this is what in the West, or even in the East, this is what is known as Hatha Yoga. Hatha. Ha means sun and Ta means moon. It's not Hatha. The H is silent. It's Hatha Yoga. Okay? And so Hatha Yoga is that compartment of Ashtanga Yoga that has to do only with asana and pranayama. However, one can argue that you really can't say that one is practicing yoga unless you're observing yama and niyama. And I'm going to talk about those either later in this talk or in another talk. So asana so these are all about the purification of one of these sheaths, or what the yogis call koshas, or the subtle bodies. So asana is about the purification of this food sheath, okay, this physical body. Pranayama is about the purification of the sheath of energy, what's called the sheath of energy, or in Western esotericism, it's referred to as the etheric body. Okay, so that's practices with your breath. This is the etheric body, or the pranamaya kosha, is also what is being addressed in acupuncture, in Chinese medicine, because they work, because often the cause of whatever the ailment is, it's not necessarily even in the physical body, it's in the etheric body. And so the acupuncturists will go in with their needles or their herbs, and they'll create little shifts in the energy body, and then it will trickle down into the physical body. Okay? Pratyahara is it's kind of seen as a gateway limb between, see, these are the more rudimentary, or the lower limbs, and these are the more advanced, or the higher limbs. Because, see, yoga is a progression in subtlety, because you're progressing towards a realization of the Atman, what they call the Atman, which is loosely translated as soul. But the yogis see the Atman, it's like it's a light, it's like it's something that has charge, okay? It's incredibly subtle, and it's actually also seen as that which incarnates. So all these sheaths, these koshas, these layers are covering the Atman, this burning, or this glowing, charged light, okay, radiant light. So these are seen as obstructions, okay, obstifications, so that are blocking the light of the soul, the light of who you really are, who one really is in the deepest layer of their being, on the deepest level, okay? See, this is what yoga is about. It's about self-discovery. So it's a purification for all these layers. So pratyahara means withdrawal of the senses. So once you have gotten your yama and niyama underway, and these are just things like yama is nonviolence, telling the truth. I think I'm going to do those in another talk. They're moral and ethical observances. There's something that you do on the inside that only you know, you and the divine. Okay. Okay, so pratyahara is when you start getting to a higher level of purification, and you go, this literally means sensory withdrawal, or withdrawal of the senses. So you start becoming not so pratyahara is when you're beginning to harmonize your body and your energy to a point where you're getting a little bit more subtle, and so your senses begin to turn inward, and you begin to not be so identified with this physical world. Okay, you start to turn inward. Okay, that's why this is known as the bridge limb of yoga, withdrawal of the senses. You do a lot of asana, a lot of pranayama, you're very pure, you have a pure diet, then your senses will start to turn inward, and you stop to identify so much with this fleshy thing. So we're starting to get closer to the Atman. Okay? Then dharana is known as concentration. Dharana and dhyana. So these are practices that are more aiming at one of the more subtle sheaths. Okay? So we're going to talk about the sheaths. This is aimed at the Annamaya kosha, or the food sheath. That's asana. Pranayama is the pranamaya kosha, the sheath of energy. Pratyahara is kind of like a bridge or a gateway, and because we also have to go through the manomaya kosha, which is the sheath that is the layer of vibrations that where our regular mundane thoughts and our emotions are. And this is what in Western esoteric sciences is called the astral body, is manomaya kosha. Okay, because see, what you think, that's going to create a certain emotion, and that emotion is a vibration. Okay, and it's actually a very powerful vibration, possibly the most powerful, and that is what is said is attracting your reality to you, is the vibration of your emotional body, which is why mental calmness and balance and stability is so valued in spiritual work, in the work of path of self-realization, is because the more your thoughts are balanced and harmonious, then the more your emotional body, the more your emotions will become smooth and calm. And so once we get through all those lower layers, right, then we get to what's called the Vijnanamaya kosha, or the body of the higher intellect. And so this is when we're getting into these higher limbs, dharana and dhyana. These are having to do with meditation. Okay, so these are very high limbs, and then the highest is samadhi, which is considered as cosmic consciousness. So that is when the yogi has reached his or her goal and has attained a union with the self, with a big S, or God, or the divine, or whatever type of language that you like. It's important to note that dharana and dhyan, this is what we know as meditation, okay? Because we're starting to make the mind subtle and to transcend the thinking mind, to transcend the habitual, the habitual and the conditioned mind, which is the manomaya kosha. So as you can see, yoga is actually quite different than Pilates or any other calisthenics. The thing that I wanted to mention about dhyan, this is actually where the word Zen comes from, right? Zen meditation is Zen is actually a Japanese mispronunciation of a word chan, which is Chinese mispronunciation of dhyan. See, so sometimes they drop the A. So it's usually written as dhyana, but it's also known as dhyan. So you can see the jump from dhyan to chan to Zen. So actually what these Zen monks are doing, Buddhism is actually a form of yoga. So this is what I mean. It's very, very vast. And so this video, I'm just trying to give kind of an overview, kind of a bird's eye view. So the modern student, walks into a yoga class and understands why they're doing what they're doing, okay? So mainly what we're doing in the West here, in like when we go to what we call a yoga class, what we are actually going to is a asana class. The asanas are the poses and the shapes. And the shapes, putting your body into these different shapes, makes this prana, this subtle energy, flow in certain ways. And it will hit up. The poses are designed to address areas where energy gets blocked in the body. So then you have this free flow of prana, and then you begin to get subtler and subtler and subtler in your energy. So until you finally reach the subtlest and the most exquisite and blissful. Okay, this is a state of bliss. When you're in samadhi, you're in bliss. Okay? So I hope that was helpful. I hope that was presented in a clear and coherent way. And please don't hesitate to message me if you have any questions or comments, and I do hope to see you in one of my live classes. Namaste.